Do you ever get tempted to choose money over other things? A few years ago, I had a funeral for a man who died in his 90s, and he had a bunch of kids. Only one of them was a parishioner, so most of them I was getting to know for the very first time when we were planning the funeral. And I loved them. They were delightful, and their interaction with each other was great. They really appreciated the childhood that they had, and they were eager to honor the dad that made it possible. And so they said lots of beautiful things that I was able to use in the homily. The funeral was very uplifting. And as they left, I hugged them. It just felt like the natural thing to do. I stayed in touch with that parishioner who was at Mass every week. And then when the 1-year anniversary of the dad's death was approaching, I said, "Tell me, how are you doing? Is your family going to mark the anniversary in some way? How is everybody?" And when I said that, she started crying. She said, "Father, we don't talk anymore. There was bad blood over the inheritance, and we're not in contact." Now, just so you know, if you think I'm talking about your family, I'm not. It's just that happens so often. What is the story? What is up with choosing money over our family? Now, before I go any further, let's just be honest and say there's a million ways that families can hurt each other. There's a million ways that injustices can happen. But let's just go back to the main point. What is up with choosing money over our family? Jesus says that our relationship with money is a big indicator of our relationship with God. Because if money is in the number one spot of our life, that means that whatever else is supposed to be there has been displaced. Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You have to choose. And in our culture, we know the choice that a lot of folks make. And it starts right at the top in business and in organizations. I don't think there's ever been a corporate boardroom in the world where they sat around and somebody from the board of directors said, "Now what are our shareholders going to say if we don't do God's will in the third quarter?" Nope. It's always about profit. Always, always, always about profit. And here's where that can go sideways. Maybe you remember in 2016, there was a CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, a company whose mission was to make and distribute life-saving drugs as their business. This CEO was called before Congress to testify because they wanted to know why that company had raised the price of a life-saving drug from $13 for a little pill to $750 for that little pill. What is up with that? Gouging people who are dying of illnesses to try to get as much money out of them as you can? How did we get there? We have to take a good look at this. And this is what's so cool about being Catholic. Everybody in the world is hearing these readings today. The entire church. So there are people in Haiti that are at church right now. They're in our time zone, hearing this reading. There's people in South America coming out of huts in Africa to their little church. There's people in India that are hearing this reading. And do you know what they're thinking? Whew, finally, someone understands. Meanwhile, there's only one group of people who live in the richest country and have the discomfort of wondering, what is God trying to say to me today? The richest country in the world? That's us. So here is the challenge for us. We know that this has gotten deep into us because they tell us that every election season, the number one topic on voters' minds is the economy. It almost always is what rules people's decisions. The economy. And that's interesting because you would think that we would care about other things just besides that. But on top of it, this crazy thing happens when there's a blip in the economy and we get nervous. We praise up and we blame down. What does that mean? Whenever there's a blip in the economy, the praise goes up and the blame goes down. Here's what that means. There's a lot of CEOs who make 500 times what their average employee makes. So then, that's fine in good times. But then, when there's a downturn in the economy, that company lays off workers. And then it freezes wages and it slashes benefits. And you know what people say? Ugh, see? The poor, they've been sponging off of us. The immigrants are taking our jobs. We blame down. Meanwhile, the CEO is making 500 times the workers. How is it that they get a pass and we start blaming the weaker ones? That happens all the time. So we're being given some strong readings today to help us to maybe question some of our assumptions. The prophet Amos today is introducing us to an image of God that we're not used to. I don't know if there's anybody here who has a special needs child, but maybe you know parents of special needs children. They are famous for being very, very cautious about the protection of their special needs child. And if someone trespasses against that, if they misunderstand or mistreat their special needs child, watch out. We are being introduced today to the thought that God is like the parent of special needs children, and those special needs children are the poor. Which is why the wording and the tone of the first reading is so strong. Hear this, those of you who trample on the needy, who manipulate the poor. Hear this, those of you who charge $750 for a pill, knowing that the person needs it to live and that they'll probably just die because they can't afford it. Hear this, all those of you who lay off low-wage workers with families and then give yourself a raise when you already make 500 times what everybody else does. Hear this. I had a very personal experience of this a couple of years ago. I was in Penn Station in New York City, and I was coming back from a day down in the city, and I was walking through a passageway where I saw a homeless woman. I wasn't surprised to see that. Anybody who goes to Penn Station knows that they'll see that. I thought she was sleeping. But when I walked by her, she lifted up her head and said, "Sir, can you help me?" And I have a policy that whenever anyone asks, I reach into my pocket and give them something. I know that's controversial. I know some people don't believe in that, but that's what I do. And I went to give her $1 and she said, "Please don't give me money. Please buy me something to eat." I have always wanted to do that, but I'm never available for that. I never have time. I'm always running. Guess what? My train wasn't for an hour. So I was thinking of little panini places we could go, maybe get a nice Cobb salad. But of course, she doesn't know about that kind of food. I said, "Where would you like to go?" She said, "McDonald's." So we went to the McDonald's by the Long Island Railroad. And when we went up, they asked her what size she wanted, and she turned and looked at me, and I said, "Large." And she smiled. As we were eating dinner, she shared with me her story. She's the only child of a woman, grew up in New Jersey. She is a special needs person. She has a very low IQ and was never able to work. Her mother took care of her, and they kind of took care of each other throughout their life. Her mother died of natural causes 3 years ago, and then the bank repossessed the house, and out she went to live on the street, unable to find employment or take care of herself. She didn't know what to do, but she knew a couple of things. She knew to be kind to everybody. She was raised that way. So she smiled and was nice to everyone she met. And somebody must have told her that she should stay awake at night and sleep during the day. And they told her that she should ride a certain train that runs all night and just change cars at every station so nobody is on to the fact that she's riding all night. And that she should sleep in a passageway that's busy during the day so there's people to watch out for her. She somewhere along the way had lost her ID. And it turns out that if you are homeless and you have no ID, you can't get help. No social worker could help her without ID. They would just say, "You need to get some identification first." She would go up to cops to ask them how to get ID, but she didn't know how to word the question. And so they always sent her away. Her name is Paula, and I have been praying for her every day since I met her. I don't know where she is now. But the last thing we did before she left was her tell me, please pray for my mom. I miss my mom so much. I just wish I had my mom. And I ask you, is she really someone that we need to be afraid of? Is she someone that we can't help and serve? Imagine how God looks at Paula. Imagine what God feels when God looks upon Paula. Imagine how God feels about the people who don't want to protect Paula but want to hurt her. This week, we're being asked some very serious questions about the role that money and faith have in our life. Because there's the first commandment that tells us God is the number one in our life, always and forever. There should be nothing before God. But a question to ask ourselves, if that's the case, is, do I ever put the economy as my number one priority? Is that something that I tend to do? Is there someone in my life that I no longer talk to because of a fight over money? Am I falling into that trap of blaming down, being angrier at the poor than I am at the greedy, thinking that poverty is a bigger sin than greed? God is saying, there are so many things I want for your life. There is so much joy I want you to be able to contain. That's the true wealth of life. But how, says Jesus, can you be trusted with true wealth if you can't even handle money?